everybody. Thank you very much for joining us this morning for what's going to be a short but important training on ethics. As you all know, we are all public servants. We all have access to public resources. And in order to maintain the trust that San Franciscans put in us and to do our jobs effectively, we must conduct city business in as fair and transparent a way as possible. As you know, between the city administrator's office and the Department of Technology, we have nearly 1,500 employees who oversee critical functions ranging from contracting to managing the city's technology infrastructure. I absolutely believe that city employees understand and embrace a culture of ethics. So today's training is really just about raising awareness and reminding you of some of the basic rules and regulations. Our single most important goal today is to help you learn where to find help and resources. Don't assume and don't normalize. We have professionals who are available to help answer any ethics question, and you should never be afraid to ask those questions. Before we begin the presentation this morning, I absolutely have to thank the team who put this all together, and that includes our presenters this morning, Deputy City Attorney Anna Flores, and a member of our HR staff, the head of our ERL team, Ricky DeWitt, as well as our organizers and facilitators, and that includes Corwin Cooley, Heidi Revoir, Angela Yip, and Vivian Poe. And then lastly, I just want to note that there will be a post-event survey that if you fill it out will help us all to continue to improve this type of training. So just a request that everyone fill out the survey before you leave the training for the day. So with that, I'm going to hand the mic back to Vivian and let the training begin. So thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you. Thank you, Katie. And now we would definitely go right into our training content for today. And I would like to invite our first speaker, Deputy City Attorney Anna Flores. Anna Flores serves as Deputy City Attorney on the Ethics and Elections team at the San Francisco City Attorney's Office. Anna has spent her whole career in public interest law working for different nonprofits and local governments. She graduated from the University of California, Santa Cruz, and received her JD from the University of California College of Law, San Francisco. May I welcome our Deputy City Attorney, Anna Flores, now.
Good morning, everyone. There you go. All right. As has previously been mentioned, today we're going to discuss very important considerations for you as city employees. The first thing we're going to talk about is gifts. So you're probably wondering, what is a gift and why should I care? And we're going to get to why you should care in a little bit. But first, a gift is anything of value for which you do not provide something of equal or greater value in return. And the example could be a restaurant meal, flowers, plane tickets, or tickets to see the Giants or Warriors or any of the favorite teams out here. Next slide, please. So, as a city employee, you cannot receive gifts from restricted sources. You're wondering probably what a restricted source is, and the definition is right there. It's basically anyone who is contracting or seeking to contract with your department, be it the city administrators or the Department of Technology, since both departments are here today, or anyone who has attempted to influence you in any legislative or administrative action in the previous 12 months. Both of these individuals or entities are considered restricted sources to you. Next slide, please. Although you cannot receive gifts technically from a restricted source, there are exceptions. So you can accept a gift from a restricted source if it is a non-cash gift worth $25 or less, up to 4 times a year, or it's a gift of food or drink, given to share in the office, similar to gift baskets for the holidays or any kind of gift basket to share. Now, we caution that although this is allowed under the city rules, we also like to perform a gut check. If it doesn't look good to the public, then you probably shouldn't be accepting it. Even though it's allowed, we always like to think about what the public is going to say when they know that we're receiving gifts from restricted sources. So although it's allowed, just perform a gut check. And if you're okay with that gut check, then go ahead and accept it. Next slide, please. So this is the quiz question that everyone took. I'm not going to go ahead and read it, but it was just basically, can you receive a gift from someone who just applied for a grant application? So hopefully everyone got this right. The answers are, next slide, please. So yes, you can accept the chocolates because it's a food to share in the office under the exceptions, but you cannot accept the tickets to the gala because it would be an individual ticket would be $30, which is more than the $25 that you're allowed to receive from a restricted source. Now, if you got that answer, great. Give yourself 1 point. Next slide, please. There are other gift rules considerations for you as a city employee. The first is gifts from subordinates. The next one is gifts for doing your job. So you may not accept or receive any gifts from people who you supervise or who are applying to work for you. And you also cannot accept any gifts for doing your jobs. And this would be any gift received for performing a specific service or act that you're expected to perform in the course of your normal business. So that would be like someone asking how they would file a sunshine request to obtain records, or someone who files to get a permit or any kind of document or service from your department. You couldn't accept a gift from them just because you were performing your regular duties. However, next slide, please. There are exceptions. So for doing your job or for from a subordinate, you can accept a non-cash gift of $25 or less given on occasions on which gifts are traditionally given, or food and drink to be shared in the office. So again, this is an exception for doing your job. So if someone comes to ask for help from your department and you help them and then they come back with some cookies to share in the office, you can technically accept those cookies even though you were just performing your job. Additionally, you can accept from a subordinate, you can accept a gift for personal hospitality and also a gift given in recognition of an occasion of special personal significance. So these are exceptions, meaning that you can accept a gift when the gift falls under these exceptions. So next is going to be our quiz question, I believe. Oh, no, I spoke too soon. So how do you avoid these rules? You just don't want to have the headache of thinking about these things. The way to avoid them is if within 30 days of receiving a gift, you either pay for it, you donate it to any 501c3 without taking a tax donation or, a tax deduction. You just say, here you go, here's a gift. Please don't name me. Or you return it to the source of the gift. These are the ways that you can avoid any of these rule prohibitions on gifts by doing these 3 things within 30 days of receiving a gift. Next slide, please. So now we're on to quiz question 2, related to your team manager's birthday. And as a supervisor, you're asking for a voluntary donation to chip in for lunch and a birthday gift. Hopefully you got these right. If you didn't, then you can figure out what the answer is on the next slide. So yes, you can ask for a voluntary contribution from other employees, as long as you let them know that it's a voluntary to contribute and each person contributes $25 or less, because that would fall under the exception for accepting gifts from subordinates. And we just like to ask you to have the birthday celebration during lunch or outside of work hours, not during working hours. So hopefully you got this right. If not, then now you know the rule. Next slide, please. Now we're moving on to use of city resources and prestige. As a city employee, you are prohibited from misusing city letterhead, business cards, email, or your title for personal purposes in a misleading way. That means, let's say you get a parking ticket one day in the city, and you go up to the parking maid and you give them your business card and you say, I work for the city administrator's office, so you shouldn't ticket me. Well, that would be prohibited because you would be using your city business card in a misleading way for personal purposes. Additionally, you cannot make, participate in making, or otherwise seek to influence an employment action involving a relative. So that means if one of your relatives wants to join you at your office, you're not allowed to serve as a personal reference or provide a letter of recommendation to them if it's for your own department. But you can provide these things on your own letterhead, not on city letterhead, if they're applying for another department. So again, if it's your department, you cannot be a personal reference or provide any kind of letter for them on behalf of them. But other departments, you're allowed to do this on your own letterhead. Next slide, please. So now we reach quiz question number 3 regarding the same exact dilemma. Your cousin is applying for a city job, and so what can you do? Next slide, please. So it's a city job on your team. So you can tell her when a job is available and point her to the Department of Human Resources job application website where the position is posted and have her apply. If you are involved in the selection process for this job, you would disclose your relationship to whoever is leading this, or if you're leading it, if you're the hiring manager, you would tell your superior and they would take over the selection process. And then you immediately have to recuse yourself from the interview or selection process. And finally, you can give her general information about the department, but again, no selective help, as she should apply as any other candidate for your department for that position. Next slide, please. Now, there are other prohibitions for you as a city employee, and this one is on political activities. So as a city employee, you cannot use city resources to support or oppose a candidate or a ballot measure. That means that you can't pick up your city phone and call someone to ask for a donation, or you can't campaign on city time, city resources, or during city you can't campaign for a political activity during working hours while on city property or on city premises. And you also can't solicit campaign donations from any city employee. Now, again, you can engage in political activity on your off time at home or anywhere else you'd like, but not on city property. And donations from city employees, you can't do that at all. So even on city time or off city time. Next slide, please. So this leads us to quiz question number 4 regarding a community organized debate that might affect city employees. You want to share these resources with colleagues. What can you do? Next slide, please. So you can forward the community debate event details from your personal email to your colleague's personal email, and you can call them on their personal cell phones and invite them to attend outside of work hours. So again, you're doing all of this on off time and not using your city resources and not on city premises. So again, you are welcome to do any kind of political thing you'd like on off hours, but you just can't do it on hours, on working hours, and on city property and using city resources. Next slide, please. Now, this next slide is very important, and it applies to anyone who's engaged in contracting or advising on public contracting for your department, division, or unit. You are subject to something called Government Code Section 1090. So if you fall in this bucket, if you are involved in any way in making contracts for your unit or division or department, you cannot participate in a contract that could implicate your personal financial interests. And this includes employment contracts. Let's say you put out a bid for something and then you want to apply for the bid. You would not be able to do that because that would be a violation of Section 1090. Contracts in violation of Section 1090 are void, and a violation of Section 1090 may subject you to sanctions, including possible criminal liability. So this is the only ethics, I think, well, just about, this is the most important ethics rule a lot of employees that they should not violate because it carries with it criminal liability. If you believe you have a financial conflict of interest or the contract you are making includes putting together the contract, the preliminary discussions of the contract, the drawing of plans or specifications or solicitations of bids, you immediately contact your deputy city attorney and you abstain from further participation until you contact them. Next slide, please. Now, if you don't end up retiring from city employment like a lot of my colleagues do, they retire from our office. Many of them actually have done so in the last year. In case you want to go on to greener pastures at another place, just remember that considerations for future employment, city employees cannot work for or receive compensation from a person or entity that entered into a contract with the city within the previous 12 months if you personally and substantially participated in that contract or award. Meaning if you worked on an entity's contract or award, you can't later go work for them if they had a contract in the last 12 months. So that's very important. But there is an Ethics Commission waiver process for doing this. It's very lengthy and rigorous, but there are some city employees who have gone through it successfully. So if you ever run into this issue, you are welcome to contact us because this is a very niche issue and we're here to help. Additionally, you can't make or participate in making or seek to influence a government decision affecting a person or entity with whom you are discussing a negotiating future employment. So that means if there's an entity for which you're working on a contract for and you think that they have really cool jobs, at that point you stop negotiating this contract and you contact your HR or your superior and say, hey, you know, I can't be involved in this because I may want to work with them in the future. But like I said, if you participated personally and substantially in the contractor award, there may be some things that can't be undone. So at any point, just be mindful if you work in contracting that there are some limitations to future employment for you. Next slide, please. Now, regarding future employment, there are post-employment restrictions that apply to all employees, not just contracting employees. An employee cannot represent any person before any court or public agency by making any formal or informal appearance in connection with the particular matter if they were personally and substantially involved, the city is a party or has a direct and substantial interest, and the matter involved the specific parties at the time of such participation. So again, you have to be personally and substantially involved in these things in order for this to apply. Next prohibition is you cannot communicate once you, I think we have a question, but so you cannot communicate once you leave city employment. There's a 1-year communication ban for talking to your department to influence a governmental decision on behalf of any other person. And so this doesn't mean that you can't contact your former coworkers to say, hey, how are you doing? How's everything going? That's totally allowed. What's not allowed is if you leave city employment and you go elsewhere and the entity that you go to wants you to call the city administrator's office because they're working on a contract and they have questions. So they want you to call them and influence a governmental decision on their behalf. You would not be allowed to do that for 1 year after terminating your city employment. And there is a waiver process, again, through the Ethics Commission. If you have questions on how to do that, you can contact us. All right, I think that this is it.
Thank you,
now I'm
Anna.
going to turn it back to Vivian. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna. Anna has covered a wide range of topics here, and I know many of you are asking if we can see these materials and slides. We are going to send out a thank you email after the meeting with links to a lot of the resources that we just mentioned, so you don't have to worry about like jotting the notes down or like the contact information now. We'll provide all that to you in an email afterwards. At this point, we're going to introduce our second speaker here, Ricky DeWeet, the director of our human resources, our own human resources team employee and labor relations division. So Ricky here oversees a team of HR analysts that advises departments regarding performance management, conducts workplace investigations, administers disciplinary process and facilitates reasonable accommodations. They also investigates claims of discrimination in employment. So from our ELR team, our director of the ELR team, Ricky DeWeed.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to spend a little bit of time going over the city's policy regarding additional employment and how to go about making a request for additional employment. So next slide, please. Okay, what is the city's policy? So under the city's civil service rules, city employees who wish to engage in outside employment must request approval from the city's HR director prior to engaging in additional employment. And this requirement is applicable to city employees in all types of appointments, exempt or permanent, and that includes both full and part-time employees. Next slide, please. So what is additional employment? Additional employment includes any employment, position, or service, including business ownership, consulting, working as an independent contractor, for which an employee receives pay in any form, and that includes salary, wage, fee, commission, or emolument. So one doesn't need to report volunteer work or hobbies unless they are getting paid for those hobbies. Next slide, please. Okay, and here is quiz question number 5. Which of the following statements is true? Now that you know a little bit more about additional employment, you should be able to answer these. Next slide, please. So the correct answer is a part-time internship with UC Berkeley is not considered additional employment because it is unpaid. All of the other answers are considered additional employment. So if you're a partner in an LLC that rents out vacation properties, that is considered additional employment because you're receiving compensation from those short-term renters. If you are regularly selling items on eBay, that's considered additional employment because you're receiving regular pay for the goods that you sell online. If you're working seasonally at a concession stand, also considered additional employment because you're earning an hourly wage. And finally, working as a real estate is considered additional employment because real estate agents are earning commissions on property sales. Next slide, please. Okay, so why must employees request additional employment? First and foremost, we want to make sure that the duties and responsibilities of the additional employment are not inconsistent or incompatible or in conflict with the employee's city duties and responsibilities. Also, we want to ensure that additional employment is not contrary to the city's interests or could lead to situations that would discredit the city. Finally, we want to ensure that additional employment will not interfere or have a detrimental effect on the employee's ability to perform their city job. Next slide, please. Okay, so please be aware that both the City Administrator's Office and the Department of Technology have statements of incompatible activities, or SIAs for short, and these detail activities that are incompatible with the public duties of both of the departments and are thus prohibited. So specifically, no employee can engage in paid or unpaid outside activity that is subject to the control, inspection, review, audit, or enforcement of the City Administrator's Office. No employee can provide assistance to anyone responding to city bids, requests for qualifications, and requests for proposals that would give a competitive advantage to the person competing for the contract. And finally, no employee may be employed by or receive pay from an individual or entity that has a contract or is a vendor with the City Administrator's Office during the past 12 months. Next slide, please. So please also be aware that the SIA contains restrictions on outside employment for employees in certain divisions within the City Administrator's Office, and those include convention facilities, county clerk, Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, real estate, Office of Contract Administration, and Office of Labor Standards Enforcement. So if you are an employee in one of these divisions and you seek outside employment, please carefully review the SIA to see whether any of these restrictions apply to you. Please also be advised that some unpaid non-work activities for example, like membership on a board or a decision-making body, may require an advance written determination or AWD by the department to ensure that those activities are not in violation of the SIA. Next slide, please. And you can locate the SIA for the city administrator and the Department of Technology on the Department of Ethics website. In addition, they are on the city administrator HR's SharePoint site. And note that Vivian is going to send out an email at the end of this training with all of these links and contact information. Next slide, please. So how do you go about submitting a request? You can find the additional employment request form on the Department of Human Resources website. You can also find it on our City Administrator HR SharePoint site. You can also just reach out to someone on my team and we'll send you one. Once a request is submitted, the Employee Labor Relations team will contact you to understand the request and to understand the possible impacts and whether there are any potential conflicts of interest. After that, the Employee and Labor Relations team will contact the supervisor and the division head to discuss any potential conflicts and any other concerns, such as performance or attendance issues. After that, if it is approved internally, the request is forwarded to the city's Department of Human Resources for final approval. Requests are approved for up to 1 year, and employees are responsible for renewing their requests prior to the expiration of the previous one. Next slide, please. And just a couple of reminders for you. Employees cannot use any city resources for additional employment. So that includes city time and that includes city equipment. Employees also cannot use any sick leave for additional employment. That would be considered a misuse of sick leave. Any employee violating the additional employment requirements may be subjected to disciplinary action. And finally, a request may be revoked following approval if it is determined that the duties or responsibilities of the additional employment are inconsistent with, incompatible, or in conflict with the city employees' duties. And next slide, please. And here are just some resources for you, which again will be provided by Vivian at the end of the training. Civil Service Rule 118 prohibits employees from engaging in outside employment that constitutes a conflict of interest. Civil Service Rule 120, this prohibits employees working outside employment while on sick leave. And the city's employee handbook, which includes rules around additional employment and use of city resources, among other topics. And that concludes the end of my slides. I will pass the mic back to Vivian.
Thank you, Ricky, for all the information that you have provided us. I want to let people know that I know there might be a lot of questions. If you have questions that we were not able to answer during this training, then you can feel free to email either your deputy city attorney that works with your division or our HR team here. So we have those email up here. And again, they will be included in the email that I'm going to send you afterwards. And if you don't know where to go, you can always email us at thecity.administrator@sfgov.org. Then we can direct your questions to the appropriate party or people that can answer your questions. So I want to make sure that for people that have a time kind of constraint of today, the training is coming to an end, but we are able to kind of answer a couple more questions in the next few minutes. But for those who need to drop off, you can drop off and the recording will still continue. And for those who would like to participate in our post-event survey, I'm going to drop the link again into the chat now. We really hope to hear from you so we can continue to refine and improve these trainings in the future. So thank you so much for all your time for those who might need to leave now. But with that said, I see that there are a couple of questions. I'm trying to kind of group them together so we can get through most of them. So I believe the first question might be directed to the city attorney. People would like to know the definition of the city property, especially if a city park or city hall would be considered city property.
Yeah, so city property is any city-owned or city-controlled property. So I do believe that the steps of City Hall are within the public's of what's allowed for the public to use without a permit, similar to a sidewalk. A sidewalk is fair game for anyone. And like I said, on your own time, off the clock, you are allowed to engage in any type of political activity that you'd like to do. You have a First Amendment right to do so. So you can do that on the sidewalk if it's off time, or if you have a permit to do it on the steps, or I don't even know if you need a permit for the steps. But if you wanted to do it at a park, which is city owned, you also would need to reserve, I believe. Get a permit to hold a political rally. You can do this, on your own time, off time. You're allowed to do any kind of thing that the public is allowed to do. The only thing that applies to on and off time is asking for political donations from other city employees.
Thank you, Anna. And we have one question of clarification for the quiz number 1. They want to ask if the box of chocolate, the price of the chocolate would be above 25. Would that be can we still accept it?
Yes, you can accept it. If it's food to share in the office, it can be above 25. It's just for each individual employee. If you're receiving an individual thing for yourself from a restricted source, it's a hard $25 cap.
Mhm.
And
Thank you,
again,
Anna.
it has to be non-cash, so it can't just give you $25. Or a gift card is also cash, so they wouldn't be able to give you that. But let's say they wanted to give you going to the movies is expensive nowadays, but let's say they wanted to give you one ticket to go to the movies, and that ticket is $15. You can receive that because it's less than 25.
Thank you, Anna, for the clarification on that. And then I see that we might have a couple of questions about additional employment. So, Ricky would like to see if you were able to further kind of define additional employment. I think especially when it comes to renting out properties or selling products on an online platform, would those be considered additional employment?
Yes, and I will say not all of these are black and white, so feel free to reach out to us, and we can talk about these a little bit more and clarify your requests. But yes, generally, if you are registered, like you say you're even just a partner, you're not the primary owner of or partner in the LLC. Say you have a spouse and your spouse has an online business, but you are on business license for all intents and purposes. We ask that those be submitted as additional employment requests. Again, I think that out of the abundance of transparency, that it's generally good to sort of over disclose rather than under disclose, right? And to ask these questions rather than making an assumption based on what you think may or may not qualify. You said one other question, Vivian, was about what specifically is considered additional employment. I think really the important thing to focus on is the compensation piece, right? So it is generally something that you are receiving pay for. So, if you are even working part-time after hours and you're being paid, that is considered additional employment. However, if you're volunteering with a local organization on the weekend, that would not be considered additional employment. So really it's the compensation piece.
Thank you, Ricky. I think we might just have time for one more question. I think Anna might have skipped an earlier question about if union activities consider political activities. You can help answer that.
Yeah, so political activities would be related to ballot measures or candidates for running for office. So under the city rules, you are allowed to engage in union activities at whatever predetermined time your office allows, but they would not be lumped into this ballot measures or candidates prohibition. And like I said, on your own time, you're allowed to do all of that. You're allowed to oppose a candidate or endorse a candidate or a ballot measure. You're allowed to do that on your own time. It's just the concern is for on city property, using city resources, or on your when you're working in office. And like Vivian said, I'm sorry, I think it was Ricky. These rules, there's gray areas. So I mean, I think that's why we're having this introductory, very brief presentation, you have the resources available. The city attorney's office actually on their website has a political activity by city officers and employees memo that's public for everyone to read. We just reissued it this past September in 2022, and that contains all the rules. You know, and if you have any, and if that memo doesn't answer your question, you're always welcome to reach out to us.
Thank you, Anna, again, and thank you, Ricky. Yes, we have a lot to cover today, and that's why we are sending out that thank you email with all the links that you might need, including the memo that Anna just mentioned about political activities. The city attorney also have a good government guide that can almost answer all questions about ethics as well. So we would also provide that as a resource. But of course, we know that that's a lot for you to absorb. And if you have any specific question, and then when it comes to ethics, it can be highly individualized. So we really encourage you to reach out to us, either to your deputy city attorney, as mentioned, Ricky's team, ELR team, or just general to the city.administrator@sfgov.org email, so we can direct your question to the right person. So I want to say thank you again to both our presenters today. They have really spent a lot of time and effort to design this training to make sure that we can raise awareness on the most basic but important ethic rules and regulations that we might come across as a team. So I would like to say thank you to them again, and thank you to all of you who spent time this morning with us. And if you wouldn't mind, again, giving us your feedback on the form that I just dropped the link into the chat again. This is our post-event survey. So that really helps us to kind of continue to refine and improve our meetings going forward. With that said, everyone have a nice afternoon, and we will provide the recording as soon as it is available. Thank you so much for your time.